initially kind of outsiders coming in and taking these semi-pornographic photographs of the ruins of the city. And Walker suggests that instead of the ruins born, that the Design 99 powerhouse projects are painted with a colorful pattern that injects a burst of life and energy onto vacant structures that tend to lack both. This isn't utopian future optimism, but a kind of joyful celebration right in the midst of challenging reality. So in other words, instead of saying that they are the be-all, the end-all, the quick fix for the city, that they're injecting this burst of life, and they're using color to inject this burst of life into the city, which is just, again, kind of an interesting thing amidst their razzle-dazzle security sculptures, which are designed to keep people out. Bizarre sculptural structures and outrageous colors that are meant to confuse trespassers. And Todd has a quote from Cope himself.
Anything too funky or artsy they tend to avoid.
So there's a sense of like an insider-outsider perspective. There's people that will understand that the color is a burst of life and a joyful celebration of place. And then the wrong people, the people that Cope and Reichert want to keep out, and that there's this presumed shared, like we'll all understand when we're reading this article, there's some people that we don't want to come in. They won't interpret this as a burst of life or an invitation to participate. They will perceive it as confusing, that they don't have the vocabulary, they don't have the language skills, right, necessary to interpret what the color is doing in this context. So I find this kind of increasingly confusing and interesting at the same time. So in fact, Walker first found the Design 99 razzle-dazzle security sculptures on a blog called Aesthetics of Joy, which describes the joyfully uninviting tension of a thing that looks lashed together from junk, but is deliberately decorative. So the project is not simply about joyfully keeping people out of vacant spaces, but the implications that the void is in the process of being filled. In other words, don't come haunt this place with your crime and your nonsense, because this confusing space is an indication that something's happening here. You don't want to mess with this place. So it's a kind of an interesting thing. So this is kind of where I'm at with the project at the moment. Right now I'm trying to create conversations between different sites. So I found it kind of interesting just to find some preliminary patterns. It's hard to see here, but there are some of the exact same colors used in the Powerhouse stripes and the Hamtramck Disneyland. I didn't, Detroit Hamtramck, the wrong thing. The Hamtramck Disneyland project. So obviously, Hamtramck Disneyland was created in the late 90s. The Powerhouse was created about 10 years later. But how did this happen? So this is the kind of question I'd want to ask. How did you choose this color? Was it like on sale? Because often that's what I do. I choose the thing that's on sale. But there are these conversations start to unfold. Similarly, on the left-hand side, you see a window. This is one of the boarded-up windows on the Powerhouse that they've painted over using, in some cases, the identical colors in the Bleeding Rainbow. So how is this possible? Why is this happening? And that's why I asked you guys that initial question about, like, what are the colors that make you happy? Is it a rainbow that makes you happy? Because, in a way, the burst of color and the burst of light and energy that both these sites happen to be projecting are rainbows, in a particular, particular shades of rainbow. So, and then the final thing that this is kind of like my new territory. I'm not quite sure where to go. It's the use of tires. I'm interested in the use of tires. I don't feel like there's been a kind of a substantial examination. I understand the aesthetic. We're all familiar with it. I haven't showed these photos to one person and they're like, what's that tire doing there in that community art project? No. It's as familiar as a handprint, right? Like, it's as familiar as seeing children's handprints on the side of a mural, potentially. And so, sorry, did you?
Oh, I was saying, I do see a lot of tires, like, around just the neighborhoods. They just be everywhere.
They're just everywhere. So, on the one hand, it's a kind of, that upcycling that a couple of authors ago were talking about, like just taking them up and making them something new. And it's totally reasonable. And what you see here is the North End mural on the upper left, that was that first purple mural that was just community art space. And then you see kind of a more fancy, aestheticized tire. Here, that's the Design 99. It's like, oh, we're not just going to have a tire and paint over it. We're going to shape it and sculpt it in a different way. And then you've got the Papillon effect and the bleeding rainbow with the kind of, the repetition of the spatter that they used in the bleeding rainbow itself, which is substantially used splatter in order to get the effect that they
Mary, you
want.
might be interested to know that country folks used to take tires years ago in the summer and paint them, take the white walls and turn them up,
Yeah.
or paint them and put flowers in them. They were decorative, but not in the city. I mean, country folks did that. They didn't have a lot of money,
No,
and they
they
were
were
quite
in the city,
attractive,
too.
actually.
We used to live on the east side of Detroit, and people used to do that all the time.
And they were quite
They
attractive
would use
with
them as
beautiful
planters.
flowers.
They would cut
Oh,
the insides of them up,
Oh, all right.
and then they
in
would
the
kind of
city.
open up, and then you'd fill them with dirt and flowers.
Yeah.
And
It was like an easy, cheap planter that looks nice and was very durable.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I've seen that for years.
for years. So it's quite familiar and yet distinctive. Each site has chosen to do something particular with color, with shape, with pattern, or with nothing at all. I mean, on the upper left, that would be more like the classic use of a tire. It's just a tire, and we're going to plant stuff in it. But then kind of these other aesthetic choices that have been made in these other spaces are also quite fascinating to me. So I'm aware that we have come to the end of our time. And so I would like to thank you so much in advance. And of course, if you have to go on to other things, I understand. But I'm happy to stay for a few minutes at least and entertain any questions or comments. And thank you so much to all of you for your various levels of participation. The conversation about color was very useful, and also if we could give a round of applause to all of our speakers.
Well, we thank Professor Anderson, and she's opened it to questions if you have questions. But it's officially up at 12:30. At 1:30, excuse me. Thank you.
Thank you, Alfred.
It was very interesting. I appreciate your sensitive eyes.
Oh, well, good. Thanks. I'm so glad that you're here, Holly, and any thoughts that you have at any time about anything, I would be very
Yeah, it's the kind
curious.
of thing you kind of think about.
Yeah, and this is very much like an in-process, because ultimately I want to talk a little bit about how these places perform their presence and how people perform in relationship to them. Since I'm not really a fine art person and I'm not an art historian, so I don't really have the chops to do a proper analysis, but I feel like since we're looking at theater and dance,
In public space.
teaching art, yeah, exactly.
That is fascinating,
I think
yeah.
that the effective dimension of this,
No,
I
that's
think
very
would be
true.
interesting. Thank you.
I wish I could take back to theater for television to make money. To me, it's you can't just go to the tires. You went from a rental location. Which is why down in my basement, too, I have computers and televisions because I don't think, it's like one day I'll go to hazardous waste stuff.
Well, you have to. Don't throw them out because they really got radioactive.
That's why tires have become planters for me, because you can't throw them out. You have to go where they'll accept it.
Yes.
Well, actually, you buy tires, though. You pay the fee when you buy new tires. They take the old ones.
Well, that was the old days, but when I mean, that's now, but
Yeah,
when I
not
had
the old
snow
days.
tires and
Oh,
dirt
you were-
tires,
oh.
we always had tires in our garage, and then
Oh,
it was
that's
like,
right.
well,
Yeah, yeah, they
you
did.
know,
Yes, exactly.
I love language too. I wish I knew
Yeah.
more.
Get rid of it,
Thank you.
make it aesthetically